Alien Girl was lost. The humans showed her the way and got a strange keycard as a reward. Chris Tarrant liked to walk, not the casual strolling most people did in cities or parks, but real walking, the kind where your boots hit rough terrain and your lungs burn with thin mountain air. The desolate landscape of Proxima B7 provided plenty of opportunities for such excursions, with its jagged purple mountains and rust-colored valleys stretching endlessly toward the horizon. Dressed in his black combat suit, complete with steel armor plating, standard issue for all human security contractors in this sector, he cut a striking figure against the alien landscape. His tousled brown hair and stubbled jaw gave him a rugged appearance that matched his surroundings perfectly. The morning's patrol had been uneventful, as usual. The alien city of New Arcturus glittered like a jewel in the distance, its crystalline spires catching the light of the binary stars overhead. Chris had deliberately chosen a route that would take him far from the city's bustle. Out here in the silence of the wilderness, he could think. That's when he heard it, a sound that didn't belong in this barren landscape. Crying. Chris's hand instinctively moved to his sidearm as he followed the sound. Years of military training had taught him to be cautious, but curiosity pushed him forward. As he rounded a massive boulder, he found the source of the distress. A humanoid alien woman sat on a rock, her head in her hands. Her violet skin seemed to shimmer in the starlight, and her long, wavy hair of the same color cascaded down her back. She wore a form-fitting black outfit that left little to the imagination, while still maintaining an air of sophisticated alien fashion. "Hey," Chris called out, keeping his voice gentle but firm. "You all right?" The alien woman's head snapped up, her iridescent eyes widening in surprise. Then unexpectedly, relief flooded her features. "Oh, thank the stars," she said in perfect English, her voice carrying a melodic quality that seemed to dance on the air. "I thought I was going to die out here." Chris approached carefully, noting how she didn't seem threatening, just genuinely distressed. "What happened?" "I'm such a fool," she said, standing up and brushing dust from her outfit. "I wanted to see the crystal falls everyone talks about, but I got turned around in these mountains. My nav system malfunctioned, and I've been wandering for hours." She gestured at the rocky terrain. "Everything looks the same out here." "The crystal falls?" Chris couldn't help but smile. "You're about 15 clicks in the wrong direction. They're north of the city, not west." 15? She groaned, pressing a delicate hand to her forehead. "No wonder I couldn't find my way back. My ship is docked in New Arcturus, and I've been walking in circles trying to find the right path." "Well, you're in luck," Chris said, his training kicking in. "I know these mountains better than most. I can guide you back to the city." He extended his hand. "I'm Chris Tarrant, by the way, human security contractor." She took his hand, her touch surprisingly warm. "Vyra Tassoni, cultural exchange officer." She smiled, revealing perfect white teeth that contrasted beautifully with her violet skin. "And I would be eternally grateful for your help, Chris Tarrant." "It's a bit of a trek back," Chris warned, already scanning the horizon to plot the safest route. "These mountains can be dangerous, especially as the suns start to set." "Dangerous?" Vyra's eyes widened slightly. "I thought this area was secured by the Coalition." Chris chuckled, the sound echoing off the rocky walls around them. "Secured is a relative term out here. The native wildlife doesn't much care for political boundaries." He gestured for her to follow him. "Stay close. The path gets tricky in places." As they began their journey, Chris couldn't help but notice how gracefully Vyra moved across the difficult terrain, despite her earlier troubles with navigation. Her species, which he now recognized as Etherian, were known for their natural agility. "So cultural exchange officer?" Chris asked as they carefully picked their way down a steep incline. "That's an interesting title." "Says the security contractor," Vyra replied with a hint of playful sarcasm. "But yes, I help facilitate understanding between species. Though today I seem to be doing a spectacular job of demonstrating how not to explore the alien worlds." Her self-deprecating humor made Chris smile. "Hey, at least you're providing a great example of interspecies cooperation right now." "Is that what this is?" She raised an elegant eyebrow. "And here I thought you were just being a gentleman." "Well, my mother did raise me right," Chris responded, extending a hand to help her over a particularly treacherous section of loose rocks. "Though she probably didn't expect me to be playing mountain guide to lost alien diplomats. Their conversation flowed naturally as they made their way through the rocky landscape. Chris found himself impressed by Vira's quick wit and intelligence, while she seemed genuinely interested in his stories about life as a human working in alien territories. "You know," Vera said after a while, "most species find humans intimidating. Your kind has this reputation for being reckless, aggressive, stupidly brave," Chris supplied with a grin. "I was going to say, or remarkably adaptable," she corrected, giving him an amused look. "Though those other traits aren't entirely inaccurate." "We prefer to think of it as being resourceful," Chris said, pausing to check their bearings. "Speaking of which, we should probably pick up the pace. Those clouds on the horizon, they're not actually clouds." Vira looked where he was pointing, her expression growing concerned. "What are they?" "Dust storm. They're common in this region, but not something you want to get caught in." He quickened his stride. "Especially not in that outfit." "What's wrong with my outfit?" Vera asked, matching his pace. "Nothing at all," Chris replied with a straight face. "If you're attending a diplomatic function, for surviving a proximate dust storm, not so much." The dust storm was gaining momentum as Chris and Vira reached the outskirts of New Arcturus. The city's protective shields cast a shimmering iridescent dome over the metropolis, its surface rippling like liquid mercury in the fading light of the binary stars. "Perfect timing," Chris said, gesturing toward the nearest shield gate. "Another 10 minutes and we'd have been caught in that mess." Vera's violet hair whipped around her face as she turned to watch the approaching wall of rust-colored dust. "I can't believe I was foolish enough to venture out there without proper preparation." She shifted her attention back to Chris, her iridescent eyes catching the light in a way that made his breath catch. "Though I suppose if I hadn't, we wouldn't have met." The shield gate's scanning beam swept over them, recognizing their credentials and granting immediate access. As they stepped through, the howling wind died away, replaced by the familiar hum of the city's environmental systems. "The Etherian district is this way," Chris offered, pointing toward a cluster of elegant crystalline structures that seemed to grow from the ground like exotic flowers. "I can escort you." "Actually," Vira interrupted, a mysterious smile playing at her lips, "my ship is docked in the commercial district." She gestured in the opposite direction, where more utilitarian structures dominated the skyline. Chris raised an eyebrow but didn't comment on the contradiction. Cultural exchange officers often had reasons for being less than forthcoming about their true destinations. As they walked through the city's winding streets, Chris couldn't help but notice how other aliens, and even humans, reacted to Vera's presence. The Etherians were known for their natural grace and beauty, but there was something different about her, something that commanded attention without seeking it. "I hope you don't mind me saying," Chris ventured, "but you don't strike me as a typical cultural exchange officer." Vera's laughter was like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "And what does a typical cultural exchange officer strike you as, Chris Tarrant?" "Well, for starters, they usually travel with an entourage, and they definitely don't go hiking in the mountains alone wearing—" He gestured vaguely at her outfit. "Ah, so you have been paying attention to my attire," she teased, her steps taking on an almost dance-like quality as she walked beside him. Chris felt heat rise to his face but maintained his professional demeanor. "It's my job to be observant." "Is it also your job to rescue lost aliens?" "Only the interesting ones." Their playful banter continued as they navigated through the commercial district's bustling thoroughfares. Street vendors hawked their wares, everything from exotic alien fruits to questionably legal tech modifications. The air was thick with the scent of various cuisines from across the galaxy, and holographic advertisements painted the buildings in ever-changing colors. Finally, they reached a private docking bay tucked away in a quieter section of the district. A sleek vessel sat on the landing pad, its hull gleaming with the same iridescent quality as Vira's eyes. It wasn't the kind of ship a mid-level diplomatic officer would fly. Vira paused at the bay's entrance, turning to face Chris. The artificial lighting caught her violet skin in a way that made it seem to glow from within. "I owe you my gratitude, Chris Tarrant." "Just doing my job," he replied automatically, though they both knew that wasn't entirely true. "Are you?" She stepped closer, close enough that he could catch the subtle fragrance of her perfume. Something alien and intoxicating. "Then consider this overtime pay." From a hidden pocket in her outfit, she withdrew a keycard. It was unlike any Chris had seen before. Black as space itself, with swirling patterns that seemed to move beneath its surface. "What's this for?" he asked, taking the card carefully. "That would spoil the surprise," Vira replied, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "Let's just say it's an invitation, one that I hope you'll accept when the time comes." Before Chris could press for more details, she rose up on her toes and pressed her lips to his cheek. The touch was brief but electric, sending a shiver down his spine that had nothing to do with the environmental controls. "Until we meet again, Chris Tarrant," she said, already turning toward her ship, "and we will meet again." Chris stood there, keycard in hand, watching as she boarded her vessel. The ship's engines hummed to life with barely a sound, definitely not standard issue for a diplomatic corps vessel. As it lifted off and disappeared into the darkening sky, he found himself staring at the mysterious card. Back in his apartment that evening, Chris sat at his desk, turning the keycard over in his hands. The swirling patterns seemed more active now, almost as if they were responding to his touch. His security training screamed that this was exactly the kind of situation he should report. Mysterious alien technology from an equally mysterious woman who clearly wasn't who she claimed to be. But something held him back. Maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was the lingering sensation of her lips against his cheek. Whatever the reason, he found himself slipping the card into his desk drawer instead of his report folder. As he lay in bed that night, watching the dust storm rage against his Windows force field, Chris couldn't shake the feeling that his life had just taken an unexpected turn. The question was, would it lead to promotion or court-martial? And either way, he had a feeling Vira Tassoni, if that was even her real name, was going to make his life a lot more interesting. A week passed before Chris finally worked up the courage to use the mysterious keycard. The swirling patterns had grown more active with each passing day, almost as if the card was becoming impatient with his hesitation. The coordinates embedded in its quantum signature led him to a section of New Arcturus he'd never visited before, a district that existed in the shadowy space between diplomatic quarters and entertainment zones. Here, the architecture blended various alien styles in a way that somehow worked, creating an atmosphere of exotic mystery. The building itself seemed to defy physics, its structure flowing like liquid metal frozen in mid-pour. No signs marked its entrance, just a simple card reader that pulsed with the same otherworldly patterns as Vira's gift. Chris took a deep breath and pressed the card against the reader. The door dissolved, revealing a lobby that looked more like an art installation than a hotel reception. A holographic attendant materialized, its form constantly shifting between different species in a hypnotic dance. "Welcome, honored guest," it said in a voice that seemed to bypass his ears and speak directly to his mind. "Your suite awaits?" The elevator ride was unlike anything Chris had experienced. Instead of moving up or down, it felt like the room was staying still while reality shifted around it. When the doors opened, he found himself in a corridor that seemed to be made of starlight. His suite's door opened at his approach, and Chris stepped into a space that defied his understanding of interior design. The room appeared to be both impossibly vast and intimately cozy at the same time. Through the panoramic windows, he could see views of alien worlds he'd never visited. Views that changed every few minutes, like living paintings. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't come." Chris spun around to find Vera lounging on a piece of furniture that seemed to be made of solidified moonlight. She'd traded her previous outfit for something even more striking, a dress that appeared to be woven from Aurora Borealis. "You're a hard woman to say no to," Chris replied, trying to maintain his composure despite the way his heart was racing. Vera rose with fluid grace, moving toward him like a dream made manifest. "That's not what I've heard about humans. Your species has quite the reputation for stubbornness. Only when we want to be." Chris found himself drawn toward her, like a planet caught in the gravity well of a star. "Speaking of reputations, I did some research on cultural exchange officers." "Did you now?" Her smile was playful, knowing. "They don't typically have access to places like this." "And what kind of place do you think this is, Chris Tarrant?" He glanced around the impossible room. "I'm not entirely sure, but I know it's way above my pay grade." Vira closed the distance between them, her iridescent eyes capturing his. "Perhaps I'm not exactly what I claimed to be. I figured that out when I saw your ship." His voice had grown husky. "The question is, why me?" "Because you surprised me." Her fingers traced the line of his jaw, sending electricity through his nerve endings. "Do you know how rare that is? To surprise someone who's lived as long as I have? And how long is that? Long enough to know what I want when I see it? Her touch moved to his lips. Your species fascinates me, Chris. You're so young, so vital. You burn so bright, live so fully. Most races take millennia to achieve what humanity has done in centuries. Is that all this is? Chris asked, fighting to maintain coherent thought as her scent enveloped him. Scientific curiosity. Vera's laugh was like music. If you think that, you haven't been paying attention. She pressed closer, her body radiating a heat that seemed to bypass his skin and warm his very soul. I chose you because when you found me in those mountains, you didn't see a lost alien or a potential diplomatic incident. You saw someone who needed help, and you gave it freely without expectation of reward. And yet here we are, Chris murmured, his hands finding their way to her waist. Here we are indeed, her lips brushed against his ear. Though I should warn you, my people have certain customs when it comes to intimacy. Should I be worried? Only if you're afraid of pleasure beyond your wildest dreams. Her eyes sparkled with mischief. Though I should mention, once we begin, there's no turning back. My species bonds intensely. Chris pulled back slightly, searching her face. Is that a warning or a promise? Both. Her fingers tangled in his hair. My people don't believe in casual encounters, Chris. If we do this, it means something. Something permanent. The rational part of his brain, the part trained in security protocols and risk assessment, screamed at him to step back, to think this through. But there was something in Vira's eyes, something ancient and wise and utterly sincere, that made all those concerns seem trivial. I'm not looking for casual, he heard himself say. Her smile was radiant. I was hoping you'd say that. What followed was a night that redefined Chris's understanding of intimacy. Vera's people had evolved the ways of pleasure that transcended physical sensation, creating connections that bridged mind and soul. Every touch, every kiss, every moment of passion was amplified by their growing psychic bond. Hours or days later, time had lost all meaning. They lay tangled in sheets that seemed to be made of woven starlight. Vera's head rested on his chest. Her violet hair spread across his skin like a living artwork. That was... Chris struggled to find words adequate to describe the experience. Just the beginning, Vira finished, tracing patterns on his chest. The bond will only grow stronger now. Soon we'll be able to sense each other's thoughts, feel each other's emotions. Is that why you really gave me the keycard? To create this bond? She propped herself up on an elbow, looking down at him with those mesmerizing eyes. I gave you the keycard because from the moment I saw you, I knew you were different. Special. My people can sense potential matches. It's part of our biology, but I've never felt a pull this strong before. So what happens now? Now? Vera's smile held secrets and promises. Now we begin the real adventure. Because there's something else I haven't told you about my species. I am the crown princess of the Etherean Empire, Vira said softly, her fingers still tracing patterns on Chris's chest. Chris's mind, still hazy from their intimate encounter, took a moment to process her words. When it did, he sat up abruptly, nearly dislodging her from her position. You're... What? Vera's laugh tinkled like crystal wind chimes. Is it really so hard to believe? The crown princess of the most advanced civilization in known space was wandering alone in the mountains? Chris ran a hand through his tousled hair. And we just... Made love, Vera finished, her iridescent eyes dancing with amusement. Created an unbreakable psychic bond? Yes, we did. She sat up, the sheets of starlight flowing around her like liquid moonbeams. And it was exactly what I hoped it would be. Chris's security training kicked in, making him analyze every interaction they'd had with new context. The Lost Tourist Act? It was a test? More of an opportunity, she corrected, reaching out to touch his face. Through their new bond, he could feel her sincerity. I've been watching humanity for decades, fascinated by your species' rapid evolution and adaptability. When reports came in about a human security contractor who treated all species with equal respect and kindness, I had to see for myself. So you staged being lost. I created a scenario where you could show your true nature without the pressure of knowing my identity. Her touch sent waves of affection through their bond. And you exceeded every expectation. Chris caught her hand, holding it against his cheek. Why me? Really? Because you're everything my people need right now. Vera's expression grew serious. The Etherean Empire is stagnating, Chris. We've become so focused on tradition and protocol that we've lost the ability to adapt, to grow. We need humanity's fire, your passion for life, your ability to face impossible odds and triumph through sheer determination. And you think I can help with that? I know you can. She moved closer, her body radiating that otherworldly warmth that seemed to reach his soul. The bond we've created isn't just emotional or physical, it's political. By the laws of my people, we're now married. Chris felt like he had been hit by a stunner. Married? The psychic bond between us is recognized as the highest form of union in Etherean culture. Her smile turned mischievous. Congratulations, you're now Prince Consort to the future Empress of the most powerful civilization in the galaxy. Before Chris could process this revelation, a soft chime filled the room. The air shimmered and a holographic display materialized, showing an older Etherean male with stern features. Your Highness, the man said, bowing slightly, the Council requests your immediate presence. There are concerns about your recent activities. Vira's expression didn't change, but Chris felt her tension through their bond. Tell the Council I'll be there shortly, Admiral Theron. The hologram disappeared, and Vera turned back to Chris with a sigh. And so it begins. The Council has probably realized what we've done. They won't be happy. Because I'm human? Because you're unpredictable, unknown, a variable they can't control. She stood, her dress materializing around her like Aurora Borealis taking solid form. They fear change, and you, my dear Chris, represent the biggest change our empire has seen in millennia. Chris watched her move around the room, gathering her thoughts. What happens now? Now we face the Council together. She turned back to him, her expression determined. They'll try to invalidate our bond, to separate us. They'll claim it's for the good of the Empire. Can they do that? They can try. Her smile turned predatory. But they've forgotten something important about our people's laws. Once a royal bond is formed, it can't be broken, and any attempt to separate bonded pairs is considered an act of treason. Chris felt a smile tugging at his lips. You planned this. I planned for the possibility. She reached out her hand to him. The question is, are you ready to fight for us? Because this won't be easy. We'll face opposition from both our peoples. There will be those who say our union is unnatural, impossible. Chris took her hand, pulling her close. I've never backed down from a fight worth fighting. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. She kissed him deeply, their bond flaring with shared passion and determination. Get dressed, my love. We have a council to scandalize. As Chris donned his security contractor uniform, which now seemed absurdly inadequate for meeting an alien ruling council, he felt Vira's appreciation through their bond. You know, she said, watching him with those mesmerizing eyes, that uniform suits you better than you might think. It represents everything the council fears, human ingenuity, adaptability, and strength. Should I change into something more diplomatic? Absolutely not. She moved to adjust his collar, her touch sending sparks through their connection. Let them see exactly who and what you are. A human who won the heart of their future empress through nothing but his own merit. As they prepared to leave, Chris caught her hand. Vira, was any of it real? The lost tourist, the damsel in distress? She turned to him, her eyes softening. The situation was manufactured, but every emotion, every reaction, every moment between us was genuine. I may have created the opportunity, but you, Chris Tarrant, made me fall in love with you all on your own. The truth of her words resonated through their bond, and Chris pulled her in for another kiss. This time, their shared passion was tinged with something deeper, a commitment to face whatever challenges lay ahead together. Ready to shake up the galaxy? Vira asked when they finally parted. Chris grinned, feeling more alive than he had in years. Lead the way, Your Highness. As they left the room, the impossible views through the windows seemed to shift in response to their mood. showing storms and supernovas, perfect metaphors for the chaos they were about to unleash on the political landscape of two civilizations. The Etherian High Council chamber was a marvel of alien architecture, its crystalline walls stretching impossibly high into a ceiling that seemed to capture and reflect the very essence of space itself. Chris stood beside Vyra, his security contractor uniform standing out starkly against the flowing, ethereal robes of the council members. Through their bond, he could feel Vyra's mounting tension, though her exterior remained perfectly composed. Just before they entered the chamber, she had whispered something that changed everything. "I can sense it already. Our union has borne fruit." Now facing the stern faces of 12 ancient Etherians, Chris fought to keep his expression neutral while his mind raced with the implications. He was going to be a father to what would likely be the first human-Etherian hybrid in history. Your Highness and the Chief Counselor, an elderly Etherian named Pyrian, spoke first. "Would you care to explain the meaning of this situation?" Vyra stepped forward, her grace and authority radiating through the chamber. "I have chosen my consort, as is my right by ancient law. A human, another counselor, whose name Chris hadn't caught, practically spat the word. And this is unprecedented, unacceptable. Actually," Chris found himself speaking before he could stop himself, "I believe unprecedented and unacceptable are two very different things." The chamber fell silent. Through their bond, he felt Vyra's surprise and delight at his boldness. "You dare address the council directly?" Pyrian's voice carried centuries of authority. "I dare to defend my wife and future child," Chris replied, his voice steady. The words sent ripples of shock through the assembled counselors. "Yes, you heard that correctly. The Crown Princess carries my child, our child, the future heir to your empire." The chamber erupted in chaos, counselors shouting over each other, some rising from their seats in outrage, others falling back in shock. Through it all, Chris stood firm, his hand finding Vyra's. "Silence!" The command came from a new voice. From a hidden door, an elegant Etherian woman emerged, her presence immediately commanding respect. Chris didn't need to be told this was the Empress herself. "Mother?" Vyra acknowledged with a slight bow. Through their bond, Chris felt her surprise. The Empress rarely attended council sessions. "So," the Empress said, her eyes fixed on Chris, "you are the human who has captured my daughter's heart and created such chaos in my empire." "Your Majesty," Chris bowed, but maintained eye contact. "I am." "And you claim she carries your child?" "I don't need to claim it," Chris replied. "Any of your medical scanners can confirm it, though I suspect you already have." A slight smile touched the Empress's lips. "Observant. Yes, our sensors detected the conception the moment you entered the chamber." She turned to the council. "The ancient laws are clear. A royal bond, once formed, cannot be broken. And now that an heir has been conceived, any attempt to separate them would be not just treasonous, but sacrilegious." "But your Majesty," one counselor protested, "a human? Our bloodline has grown stagnant," the Empress cut him off. "For millennia, we have bred among ourselves, becoming ever more set in our ways, ever more resistant to change. Perhaps this is exactly what we need." She turned back to Chris. "Tell me, human, what do you bring to our empire besides your genetic diversity?" Chris felt Vyra's encouragement through their bond. Humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology or our physical capabilities. It's our adaptability, our ability to face the impossible and find a way through. We don't accept limitations, we overcome them. "And how would you demonstrate this quality?" "I'm standing here, aren't I?" Chris gestured around the chamber. "A simple security contractor facing the most powerful governing body in known space, defending my right to love your daughter and protect our child. If that's not human adaptability and determination, I don't know what is." Unexpected laughter filled the chamber. The Empress was actually chuckling. "Well said." She turned to the council. "My daughter has chosen well. This human understands something you've all forgotten. That true strength lies not in rigid adherence to tradition, but in the courage to forge new paths." "But the protocols," Pyrian began. "Will be adapted," the Empress declared, "just as they have been throughout our history. Or did you forget that our current form of government was itself once considered radical? Through their bond, Chris felt Vera's joy and relief washing over him. She stepped forward, addressing the council directly. My choice is made. My bond is formed. My child grows within me. You can either accept this change and help us guide our empire into a new era of growth and adaptation, or you can cling to your fears and watch our civilization continue to stagnate. The chamber fell silent as her words sank in. Finally, Pyrion spoke again, his tone resigned but thoughtful. Perhaps there is wisdom in this union we cannot yet see. He turned to Chris. You will need to learn our ways, our history, our protocols. And you'll need to learn ours, Chris replied, because this child will be a bridge between two civilizations. It deserves to know both sides of its heritage. The Empress nodded approvingly. It is decided then. The council will accept this union and begin preparations for a formal royal wedding ceremony. She paused, her eyes twinkling. Though I believe the traditional consummation ritual will have to be waived, given the circumstances. Chris felt heat rise to his face as several counselors actually chuckled. Through their bond, Vira's amusement sparkled like starlight. As they left the chamber later, Vira pulled him into an alcove, her eyes shining with joy and mischief. You were magnificent, she whispered, pressing against him. I knew you'd win them over. We won them over, Chris corrected, his hand resting on her stomach where their child grew. All three of us. The grand cathedral of the Etherean Empire floated in high orbit above their homeworld, its crystalline spires catching starlight and transforming it into cascading rainbows. Inside, preparations for the first human Etherean royal wedding were underway, blending traditions from both cultures in ways that had protocol ministers from both species pulling their hair out. Chris stood before a mirror, adjusting the ceremonial armor that combined human military precision with Etherean artistic flair. Through their strengthening bond, he could feel Vira's excitement and anticipation from her preparation chamber on the other side of the cathedral. Nervous? Admiral Theron asked, his earlier hostility having evolved into grudging respect over the past weeks. About the wedding? No. Chris checked his ceremonial blade, a human tradition the Ethereans had agreed to incorporate. About the 7 assassination attempts we've already stopped? Maybe a little. 8, Theron corrected. We caught another one this morning, so some hardliners still can't accept change. Chris nodded grimly. Despite the Empress's support and the Council's official acceptance, there were those who saw his union with Vera as an abomination. Their latest attempt had involved trying to sabotage the cathedral's environmental systems, a plot that would have killed hundreds of guests from both species. Through their bond, Chris suddenly felt Vira's alarm. Something was wrong. They're here, she projected into his mind. The royal chamber is compromised. Without hesitation, Chris bolted from the room, Theron close behind. The Admiral was shouting orders into his communicator, but Chris was already running on pure instinct and the pull of their bond. He rounded a corner to find 2 guards unconscious outside Vera's chamber. The door was sealed, but he could hear fighting inside. Through their connection, he felt Vera's fierce determination. She was holding her own, but she wasn't alone. The door's encrypted, Theron announced, working at the control panel. Chris didn't hesitate. He drew his ceremonial blade, which, unlike traditional ceremonial weapons, was very real and very sharp, and plunged it into the panel's seam. Using it as a lever, he forced the door open through sheer human strength. The scene inside was chaos. Vira, resplendent in her wedding dress, was facing off against 3 assassins, using her natural Etherean abilities to keep them at bay. A 4th lay unconscious, or worse, in the corner. That's my wife, Chris announced, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made even hardened killers pause. And you're all at my wedding. The assassins turned, clearly not expecting the groom to arrive so quickly. Their hesitation was all Chris needed. He launched himself into the fray, his combat training combining with his ceremonial armor's enhanced capabilities. The first assassin went down to a precisely aimed strike to the throat. The second managed to draw a weapon, but never got to use it. Chris's blade found a gap in their armor that no one but a human would have thought to exploit. The third, seeing his companions fall so quickly, made the mistake of trying to use Vira as a hostage. He didn't account for their bond, which let Chris know exactly when Vera would duck, allowing his thrown blade to find its mark. The entire fight lasted less than 30 seconds. 8 assassination attempts? Vira said, straightening her dress with imperial dignity. I believe you mean 9. Chris moved to her side, his hands checking her for injuries, even as their bond told him she was unharmed. Are you all right? The baby? We're fine. She placed her hand over his where it rested on her stomach. Though I believe we've thoroughly scandalized the protocol ministers. Fighting assassins in my wedding dress wasn't in the ceremony guidelines. Security forces finally burst in, led by Theron, who took in the scene with a mixture of shock and admiration. Remind me, the Admiral said, why did anyone think attacking a human warrior and an Etherean princess was a good idea? Desperation, Vira answered, her voice turning serious. They fear change so much that they're willing to die to prevent it. She looked at the fallen assassins, though I doubt they expected to die quite so quickly. Chris felt her concern through their bond. Hey, he said softly, turning her to face him. This changes nothing. We're still getting married today. In this dress, she gestured to the now slightly battle-damaged gown. It's hardly proper. It's perfect, Chris insisted. What better way to start our union than by fighting side by side? Besides, he grinned, I think it adds character. Through their bond, he felt her amusement and love wash over him. My human warrior, she murmured, pulling him down for a kiss that sent sparks through their connection. Your Highnesses, Theron interrupted reluctantly. The ceremony. Right, Chris straightened, but kept his hand in Vira's. Let's go get married, unless anyone else wants to try stopping us. The ceremony that followed was unlike anything either civilization had seen before. The bride's slightly battle-damaged dress and the groom's blood-spattered ceremonial armor became instant symbols of their union. Beauty and strength, tradition and adaptation, coming together in perfect harmony. When they spoke their vows, combining human promises of loyalty and love with Etherean pledges of eternal spiritual union, their bond flared so brightly that every psychically sensitive being in the cathedral felt it. Well, the Empress said during the celebration that followed, I believe you've managed to create yet another precedent. No royal wedding in our history has ever involved combat. Just keeping things interesting, Mother, Vira replied, her hand never leaving Chris's. Indeed, the Empress's eyes twinkled. Though I suspect things will only get more interesting from here, especially once my grandchild arrives. Through their bond, Chris and Vira shared a moment of perfect understanding. Their child would be born into a world of both danger and wonder, but they would face it together, just as they had faced everything else, with human determination and Etherean grace. The royal yacht, Star Weaver, glided through the quantum slipstream, its crystalline hull refracting light in ways that made it appear both solid and ethereal. In the ship's observation dome, Chris stood with his arms wrapped around Vira, their bodies fitting together perfectly as they watched the cosmos streak by in ribbons of light. Still can't believe you have an entire planet just for royal honeymoons, Chris murmured, his lips brushing against her violet neck. Vera leaned back into his embrace, her amusement flowing through their bond. The paradise world of Lumeria isn't just for honeymoons. It's a sacred place where our people go to strengthen their psychic bonds. She turned in his arms, her iridescent eyes meeting his. Though I must admit, no one has ever tested its effects on a human-Etherean bond before. First time for everything, Chris replied, losing himself in the depth of her gaze. Through their connection, he could feel how their child's presence was already strengthening their bond, adding new layers of sensation and emotion to every touch, every kiss. Speaking of firsts, Vira's fingers traced patterns on his chest. Mother's scientists are fascinated by how quickly our bond has developed. They say it's unprecedented. Everything about us is unprecedented, Chris reminded her, catching her hand and bringing it to his lips. That's what makes it exciting. Their honeymoon suite took up an entire deck of the yacht, its walls programmed to show whatever view of space they desired. Currently, it displayed a nebula that seemed to pulse in time with their heartbeats. You know, Vera said, moving toward the suite's private pool, filled with something that looked like liquid starlight. Etherean tradition says that bonds formed in Lumeria's sacred waters are blessed with eternal strength. She began to unfasten her dress, letting it pool around her feet. Chris felt his mouth go dry, even as their bond thrummed with shared desire. Is that so? She hummed, stepping into the pool. Though no human has ever participated in the ritual before, it could be intense. You know me, Chris said, already removing his own clothes. I love a challenge. The liquid starlight was warm against his skin as he joined her, its surface rippling with patterns that seemed to respond to their emotions. Through their bond, he could feel Vira's desire mixing with his own, creating feedback loops of sensation that threatened to overwhelm them both. The waters enhance psychic connections, Vira explained, her voice husky as she moved closer. Every touch, every emotion becomes magnified. What followed was unlike anything Chris had experienced before. Even their first night together paled in comparison. The sacred waters amplified their bond to new heights, turning every caress into an explosion of shared sensation, every kiss into a supernova of emotion. Hours later, they lay entwined on a bed that seemed to float in space itself, their bond humming with contentment. Through their connection, Chris could feel both Vira's satisfaction and their child's peaceful presence. That was, he searched for words. Unprecedented? Vira suggested with a laugh that sent shivers of pleasure through their bond. I was going to say amazing, but unprecedented works too. He propped himself up on an elbow, looking down at her. Though I have to ask, was this part of your plan all along? When you pretended to be lost in those mountains? Vira's fingers traced the line of his jaw. Would you believe me if I said no? That finding you was the most wonderfully unexpected thing that's ever happened to me? Through their bond, he felt the absolute truth of her words. I believe you, though I'm still trying to wrap my head around how a princess of the most advanced civilization in space managed to actually get lost. I wasn't lost, she reminded him with a playful smile. I was temporarily misplaced. There's a difference. Ah, of course, my mistake. He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Though I have to say, for someone who was just temporarily misplaced, you seemed pretty distressed when I found you. I'm an excellent actress, we are, she said with mock haughtiness, then softened. Though my tears weren't entirely fake, I was frustrated, tired of the endless political machinations, the constant pressure to be perfect. She touched his face gently. Then you appeared, this wonderful human who didn't know or care who I was, who helped me simply because it was the right thing to do. And now look at us, Chris gestured around their honeymoon suite, married, expecting a baby, and about to land on a sacred planet to perform ancient rituals in blessed waters. Speaking of which, Vira sat up, the sheets sliding off her violet skin in a way that immediately captured Chris's attention. We should be approaching Lumeria soon. The actual ceremonial pools there make this one look like a puddle. Through their bond, Chris felt her anticipation, both for the sacred rituals and for what would follow. More unprecedented experiences? Oh yes, she purred, moving to straddle him. Though perhaps we should practice a bit more first, just to be prepared? Their laughter turned to sighs of pleasure as they lost themselves in each other once again, their bond singing with joy and love. Outside their suite, the stars continued their eternal dance, bearing witness to a union that would change two civilizations forever. The sacred pools of Lumeria shimmered with an otherworldly radiance as three moons aligned in the violet sky above. Chris paced outside the ceremonial birthing chamber, his bond with Vira thrumming with a mixture of pain, excitement, and anticipation. Your Highness, Admiral Theron approached, his usual stoic demeanor softened by the momentous occasion. The Empress's ship has just entered orbit. She doesn't want to miss the first human Etherian royal birth. Chris nodded, his attention split between the Admiral's words and the sensations flowing through his bond. Inside the chamber, Vira was surrounded by both Etherian healers and human doctors, all working together to ensure the safe delivery of a child, unlike any the galaxy had seen before. Through their connection, he felt Vira's amusement at his anxiety. Come in, my love. Her thoughts reached him. I need you here. The birthing chamber was a marvel of both species medical knowledge. Crystal formations channeled the sacred water's energy, while human medical monitors tracked every vital sign. Vira floated in a pool of liquid starlight, her violet skin gleaming with an inner radiance that took Chris's breath away. The alignment is nearly perfect, one of the Etherian healers announced. The sacred waters are responding to the child's presence. Chris took his place beside the pool, reaching for Vira's hand. The moment their skin touched, their bond exploded with shared sensation. He could feel everything she felt, their connection stronger than ever before. "Remember when you found me in those mountains?" Vera's voice was steady despite her labor. "Did you ever imagine we'd end up here?" "Not in a million years," Chris replied, pressing his forehead to hers. "Though I'm starting to think you might have had some idea." Her laughter turned into a gasp as another contraction hit. Through their bond, Chris shared her pain, his human resilience helping her endure. "The alignment!" someone shouted. Above them, through the chamber's crystal dome, the three moons of Lumeria formed a perfect triangle. The sacred waters began to pulse with light, responding to the celestial event. What happened next would be talked about for generations. As their son entered the world, the sacred waters erupted in a display of light and energy that bathed the entire chamber in radiance. The baby's first cry carried notes of both human strength and Etherean harmony. "He's perfect," Vira breathed, cradling their son. The child's skin was a lighter shade of violet than his mother's, with subtle patterns that seemed to shift like starlight. His eyes, when they opened, were his father's deep brown, but with the same iridescent quality as his mother's. "He's strong," the human doctor confirmed, checking readings. "His hybrid physiology is stable. Better than stable. It's like the best qualities of both species have combined." The Etherean healer nodded in agreement. "The sacred waters have blessed him. See how they respond to his presence?" Indeed, the pool's surface rippled with patterns that matched the markings on the baby's skin. Through their bond, Chris could feel the child's consciousness already reaching out, strong and curious. The Empress entered the chamber, her presence commanding even in this intimate moment. "Well," she said, looking down at her grandson, "it seems the universe itself approves of your union." She turned to address the assembled witnesses. "Let it be known that on this day, not only was a prince born, but a new era began." She placed her hand on the child's head, and the sacred waters pulsed in response. "I hereby announce my intention to step down from the throne. Within the year, Vira and Chris will assume leadership of our empire, with their son as living proof of what our species can achieve together." The announcement sent ripples of excitement through the chamber, but Chris barely noticed. He was lost in the moment, holding his wife and son, their bond now a three-way connection of pure love and joy. "What shall we name him?" he asked softly. Vira smiled, her violet eyes meeting his. In the ancient Etherean tongue, there is a word, Astron. It means one who bridges stars. Astron, Chris tested the name, feeling how it resonated through their bond. Their son cooed in response, the sacred waters dancing around them. Later, as the moons began to separate in Lumeria's sky, Chris and Vera stood on a balcony overlooking the sacred pools. Astron slept peacefully in Vera's arms, his dreams sending ripples of contentment through their shared bond. "You never did tell me," Chris said, wrapping his arms around his family. "That day in the mountains, were you really lost? Or was it all part of some grand plan?" Vira turned to face him, her eyes sparkling with the same mischief that had first captured his heart. "Let's just say I was lost until I found exactly what I was looking for." She kissed him softly, their bond singing with shared love. "Though I must admit, even I couldn't have planned how perfectly it all turned out. A human security contractor and an alien princess?" Chris mused, touching their son's cheek. "Who would have thought?" "The best love stories are the unexpected ones," Vira replied. "Speaking of which," she handed Astron to a waiting nurse and pulled Chris toward their private chambers, her desire flowing through their bond. "We should properly celebrate our new titles. Future Emperor." Chris grinned, following his wife as he had since that first day in the mountains. "Lead the way, future Empress. You know I'll follow you anywhere." Above them, the three moons of Lumeria continued their eternal dance, bearing witness to a love that had changed the course of two civilizations, all because a human male had shown a lost alien girl the way, and gotten something wonderfully unexpected in return.